Since Maria and Lo grew up in Aspen, at least part of the time, many of you probably know more about them than I do myself. But you may also be here because you love Maria's novel, Where'd You Go, Bernadette, as much as I did. Everyone I know has read that book and just loved it, I think as evidenced by this very large crowd here this evening. It's one of the few books that my wife and my daughter and myself all loved equally as well. We usually don't like the same books. And I think it's because it spoke so vividly of our own artistic, misfit, skeptical, rebellious relationship to the world and ourselves and this unusual community. And it also spoke to our own clumsy, imperfect need for each other. It's such a funny and sad and original and human book. I just loved it. And perhaps that's why it's been running on the New York Times bestseller list for 50 weeks plus. That's amazing. Great. Maria is also the author of the novel This One Is Mine. It's for sale in our lobby. As a screenwriter, her credits include Mad About You, Saturday Night Live, Arrested Development, Suddenly Susan, and Ellen. She was nominated for an Emmy in 1997 for Mad About You, and in 2006 and 2007 she was nominated for a Writers Guild of America Award for Arrested Development. Her writing has appeared in The New Yorker, and she has also taught fiction at the Richard Hugo House. Lo Semple, I've taken great pleasure in getting acquainted to Lo in the last actually several weeks, going back and looking at his archival columns. And they're so much fun. They're mischievous and funny, and they speak to Lo's great affection for this place and the epic adventures one can have here. So Lo will be interviewing Maria tonight, and I can't wait for it. So without further ado, it's a great delight to have you both here, and please join me in welcoming Maria and Lo Semple.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really beyond moving for all of you to be here. My only chance before now to be on stage at Pappy Auditorium was when I was at the Aspen Country Day School, and the high school was doing a performance of 10 Little Indians, and there were parts for 12 and 13 people in the high school, and everybody auditioned, and I was the only one who didn't get a part. So what can I say? Revenge is a dish best served cold. It's very nice to be here. And also I wanted to start by acknowledging the passing of our father, Lorenzo Semple Jr., who I think a lot of people here knew. And he passed peacefully a few days ago at his house in Brentwood. And of all the wild accomplishments and wonderful things he did, I think that he might have been most proud of his decision to move the family to Aspen. And we moved here in 1976 or something? 74. And it was a very weird thing to do at the height of his screenwriting career, just say, hey, let's just go to Aspen. And I hear it's great. We heard from Catherine Thalberg, who was a friend from Los Angeles. She said, come on up. And so we did, and this really is our home. And so we've all gone different places. As I went through the list, that I'm in Seattle, my sister's in New York, my mother's in LA, I think you've got the best Semple in Aspen, so. Yeah. That's right, Lo. So I'm here with my book, Where'd You Go, Bernadette? And I'm going to do a short reading to start things off. This book I wrote in Seattle. We had moved from Los Angeles, and I was in a very dark place emotionally. I had a successful career in LA and thought, oh, I'll just go to Seattle and make a bunch of friends, and it'll all just, the life as a cabaret will just continue, but up in Seattle. And that's what I thought it would be. And at the same time we moved up there, my first novel, This One Is Mine, was published. And I loved the novel, and it didn't break out, you know, it just was kind of nicely reviewed and died. And it was very painful, and it was almost intolerable for me to kind of accept what had happened. And so there I found myself in Seattle with all these new type of people who, and I didn't feel very welcome there. But in their defense, I hated them first. So so must take responsibility for that. And so instead of kind of accepting responsibility for my own kind of poisonous, toxic victimization, I thought that I would instead blame all of my personal problems on a city full of people I've never met, and thus the book. But you know, there's actually a missing step there, which was when I was really in a bad way. I called up a friend in Los Angeles who'd been my former shrink and now is a friend, and I was just going on and on about, oh, the people here and all the kindergarten mothers with gray hair, and they all drive Subaru, and no one have a sense of humor, and I'll never write again, and I'm such a failure, and I just don't have the courage or the strength to bounce back from this devastating artistic failure. And he said to me, Maria, you're a writer. Writers must write. If you do not write, you will become a menace to society. And I think you know that line from the book. So that is where the book started, with that one line. And I thought, oh my gosh, who would I be in 15 years from now if I never bounce back from this failure? And I just kind of went to town, figuring out a woman who was so ashamed of an artistic failure in her past that she couldn't bounce back, and what would life look like? So that was really what I was trying to write with this book. I'm going to read a section of the book that as I was writing it, referred to as Bernadette's letter, which, as you probably all know, this is an epistolary novel, so it's all letters. But I knew in the middle of the book, the whole book would hinge on Bernadette explaining what she's been doing for the last 20 years to an architect friend back in Los Angeles. And I knew it had to be really, really good, and it really scared me, the thought of writing this letter. And I did it, and I'm now going to read you from it. And so this is Bernadette. All you need to know about this is that she's in Seattle unhappy and explaining to her former colleague, she had been an architect herself, what she's been doing in Seattle. Paul, greetings from sunny Seattle, where women are gals, people are folks, a little bit is a skosh. If you're tired, you're logy. You can't sit Indian style, but you can sit crisscross applesauce. When the sun comes out, it's never called sun, but always sunshine. Nobody swears, but someone occasionally might drop the F-bomb. You're allowed to cough, but only into your elbow. And any request, reasonable or unreasonable, is met with, no worries. Have I mentioned how much I hate it here? You probably wonder what I've been doing for the last 20 years. I've been resolving the conflict between public and private space in the single-family residence. I'm joking. I've been ordering shit off the internet. So here we are in Seattle. First off, whoever laid out this city never met a four-way intersection they didn't turn into a five-way intersection. They never met a two-way street they didn't suddenly and for no reason turn into a one-way street. They never met a beautiful view they didn't block with a 20-story old folks home with zero architectural integrity. Wait, I think that's the first time the words architectural and integrity have ever been used together in a discussion of Seattle. The drivers here are horrible. And by horrible, I mean they don't realize I have someplace to be. They're the slowest drivers you ever saw. If someone is at a five-way stoplight and growing old while they're waiting for the lights to cycle through, and finally it's time to go, you know what they do? They start, then put on their brakes in the middle of the intersection. You're hoping they lost half a sandwich under their seat and are digging for it. But no, they're just slowing down because after all, it is an intersection. Sometimes these cars have Idaho plates, and I think, what the hell is a car from Idaho doing here? Then I remember, that's right, we neighbor Idaho. I've moved to a state that neighbors Idaho. And any life that might still be left in me kind of goes poof. Seattle. I've never seen a city so overrun with runaways, drug addicts, and bums. Pike Place Market, they're everywhere. Pioneer Square, teeming with them. The flagship Nordstrom, have to step over them on your way in. The first Starbucks, one of them hogging the milk counter because he's sprinkling free cinnamon on his head. Oh, and they all have pit bulls. Many of them wearing handwritten signs with witticisms such as, "I bet you $1 you'll read this sign." Why does every beggar have a pit bull? Really? You don't know? It's because they're badasses, and don't you forget it. No one's ever laughed at that. I think that's a hilarious line. I swear, I'm gonna read that until someone laughs at it, then I'll just stop reading it. I'll spare everyone. Anyway, maybe I should have said it's because the beggars are badasses. Anyway, I don't know. There's something's not working there, and I don't know what it is. Okay, I'll continue. I was downtown early one morning, and I noticed the streets were full of people pulling wheelie suitcases. And I thought, wow, here's a city full of go-getters. Then I realized, no, these are all homeless bums who have spent the night in doorways and are packing up before they kicked out. Seattle, it's the only city where you step in shit and you pray, please God, let this be dog shit. And don't get me started on Canadians, it's a whole thing. Remember when the feds busted in on that Mormon polygamous cult in Texas a few years back? And the dozens of wives were paraded in front of the camera, and they all had this long mouse-colored hair with strands of gray, no hairstyle to speak of, no makeup, ashy skin, Frida Kahlo facial hair, and unflattering clothes. And on cue, the Oprah audience was shocked and horrified. Well, they've never been to Seattle. There are two hairstyles here, short gray hair and long gray hair. You go into a salon asking for color and they flap their elbows and cluck, oh goody, we never get to do color. Nobody in Seattle likes me. See, that's supposed to be funny too. Because of course they don't, she's a bitch. The day I got here, I went to Macy's to buy a mattress. I asked if someone could help me. You're not from around here, are you? The lady said. I can tell from your energy. What kind of energy was that? That I asked to be helped by a mattress sales lady in a mattress department? Let's play a game. I'll say a word and you say the first word that pops into your head. Ready? Me, Seattle, you, rain. What you've heard about rain, it's all true. So you'd think it would become part of the fabric, especially among the lifers. But every time it rains and you have to interact with someone, here's what they'll say. Can you believe the weather? And you want to say, actually, I can believe the weather. What I can't believe is I'm having a conversation with you about the weather. But I don't say that, you see, because that would be instigating a fight, something I tried my best to avoid with mixed results. My first trip here up to Seattle, the realtor picked me up at the airport to look at houses. The morning batch were all craftsmen. which is all they have here, if you don't count the rash of view-busting apartment buildings that appear in inexplicable clumps, as if the zoning chief was asleep at his desk during the 60s and 70s and turned architectural design over to the Soviets. Everything else is craftsman, turn-of-the-century craftsman, beautifully restored craftsman, reinterpretation of craftsman, need some love craftsman, modern take on craftsman. It's like a hypnotist put everyone from Seattle in a collective trance. You are getting sleepy. When you wake up, you will want to live only in a craftsman house. The year won't matter to you. All that will matter is that the walls be thick, the windows tiny, the rooms dark, the ceilings low, and it be poorly situated on the lot. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's give a hand.
That was so good.
Ooh, thank you.
Oh, pardon me, I'm tearing up at emotion of seeing my sister so successful and also.
First time he's ever cried. Sharon, are you seeing this? I know. Yeah.
I know. I only usually cry at commercials and greeting cards, but this is very out of character.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, sweet, Lo.
But
we'll build on this.
Okay. Good.
Okay. Good.
It's like therapy at a sold-out auditorium. I
yeah.
like it.
I think you call that a nightmare. Yes, yes. Yeah.
Okay, let's start with some of these questions that I've formulated while skiing buttermilk today. The epistolary format.
Yes.
Is it's crazy, it's frenetic, and at first for me it was hard to digest, and it was hard to get into the flow of it. Then I had an epiphany of why, and that was because it's a lot like my own modern day life, with the docudramas of back and forth emails, phone calls, messages, textuses, I think is the plural. And
texti.
Texti, thank you.
Yeah.
And the often misinterpretation of these things. Do you think, or how do you think that had to do with the popularity of the book?
I chose to write it in the format of an epistolary novel. Really, it was just kind of creative problem solving, because I started the book in the first person, and Bernadette was so overbearing and toxic that I wanted to take her out back and shoot her, and if I did, I can't imagine what the reader would think about it. And I just thought I can't expect anyone to hang in for 300 pages of this. So I switched over to third person, but I wasn't able to capture her voice and kind of her craziness. It was just hard. You know the difference between first person and third person, don't you?
Barely.
Okay, good. Okay. So the third person was so that didn't work. And then it occurred to me that Bernadette, when I go on walks a lot, I write in the morning for maybe 2 hours and then do about a 2-hour walk, and that's really where all the magic happens. Is on the walks. You just start kind of coming up with things.
I get that hiking Highlands Bowl a lot, so I can
totally. Yeah, I bet you probably come up with a lot of your column ideas, right? Just on the chairlift or just out. It's never like you don't just sit there and force it at the computer.
Magic happen.
Yeah, it doesn't. No, it just kind of pops in, when you're least expecting it. And so I thought that Bernadette, because she didn't like people, she probably would have an assistant to do things for her, so to interact with people. But then I thought, but wait, then you don't want the assistant in the house with you, because then you have to deal with the assistant and all of their problems. So I thought maybe she just emails the assistant. So these are things you just kind of work out. And so then the next day I went home and wrote her like emailing the assistant. And suddenly there was so much energy, it really just crackled. It kind of scared me. And because I got Bernadette's voice, and I liked the kind of how imperious she was, and oversharing I thought was funny. I could get a lot of comedy out of oversharing with an assistant. And so then I thought, I'll just do the whole book this way. And so I in fact, it's so interesting how the book is one thing to you and then a very different thing to other people. I really felt I was writing a very old-fashioned book, because epistolary novels are so old-fashioned and out of favor, that I went and read some very old epistolary novels to kind of learn some of the
As
tricks.
I Lay Dying, for example.
Oh, is that one? Well, aren't you, Mr. Smarty Pants?
Like
My God, there you go.
The most famous.
Shit, really? Okay, okay, well there, okay, score one for him. So no, not that one. Not that one, yeah. Not that one. But no, how about an 18th century one called Les Liaisons Dangereuses? I bet you haven't read that.
It doesn't interest me.
Yeah, okay, so that one I read. That was one of my favorite books. So I read that, and then it just became really fun, you know. And if you noticed, I actually don't have, even though you said I have text. You're obviously not reading my book very carefully, but I do not have text, and I don't have Facebook or Twitter or any of that stuff, because I think that stuff is tacky. I'm not on social media, and I felt like I don't want it to junk up my book. I felt like that would just, you know, like it's my book. I can do it the way ever I want. Thank you. All right, I love it. God bless you. Yeah, I just thought that's tacky. I don't want Facebook posts in my book, you know. And everybody the first people who read the book was like, oh, you can bring it even further with Facebook. Lorenzo, he's not here to defend himself, but honestly, it was one of Poppy's suggestions. Was you should put text in, you should put all this stuff. And I thought, no, that's tacky. I don't want to put it in my book. I can do it the way I want. And so that's why there's this real, you know, fakeness to it, which is these very long formal letters that people write to each other, you know, but that's what an epistolary novel is. You write long letters to each other. And so I didn't want to compromise the language too much, you know, because we all write letters without capitalizations and emoticons and all of that. So I had to make it arch in this kind of fake reality where people are writing these kind of semi, you know, flowery, and not flowery, but just overly long letters to each other.
Good. Okay, let's.
And so, oh wow, you're really done with this.
That's good. I like that
Apparently
answer.
it's not that interesting. You're the one who asked the question. Okay. Gee, excuse me for answering the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're excused. You're excused. So now, when someone in your family writes something, there's a common misperception that people in the family, or maybe the person reading it, is in the book.
Okay.
LG's brother, Van.
Okay. The deadbeat house sitter?
I just so happen to drive a van, so I don't know if there's any. His job is flushing toilets in second homes for a living.
Because the pipes break. I mean, because the pipes freeze.
It's a job. It's a job.
Okay.
Whereas I mow lawns in Aspen's exclusive West End and actually bend over and pick up the excrement. What are your experiences of people claiming to be characters in your books? And more importantly, who am I in the book?
Okay. You know, you are not in the book, and if this was not being taped, I would tell you, you know who Van is, really. We're not going to say his name.
No.
Okay, I'll tell you afterwards.
Okay.
But, but it's based on someone we know. But his name is Van, oh God, I should remember, but Bernadette calls him Van, are you going to eat the rest of that branch, right? Because he's just a scammer, right? He's just like always saying, are you going to eat the rest of that? And so, so I actually came up with this character because I know that here in Aspen, in the winter, you can't have the pipes freezing, so people come around and flush the toilets, right? To just get the water running through the pipes. And so I heard that and I thought that was interesting. And I wanted him to be a deadbeat, but he actually is not based on you.
Phew.
You know, yeah. Whew. But no, I don't think that they're. You know, I've been flirting, as you know, with this writing an Aspen book, and you are really going to be one of the main characters in that. Okay. So you know that. Good. I know. Okay. He is, but what makes it is kind of weird is that the character, at least in the way that I wrote it, the character that's based on me ends up with him, which is a little weird. So maybe that's why I backed off it.
It
just kind of worked out that way with the characters. Yeah.
That's not going to work. You're cute and all, but that's where I draw the line. Okay, so the book about Seattle, It's one thing to make fun of a town you grow up in, which I get great joy in doing in my column here. It's another thing entirely to move to a town and start making fun of it.
I know.
It has to be done very tactfully, because we see people come to Aspen and do the same thing and tell us what our problems are, and then how to solve them, and then those people end up not getting invited to cocktail parties. What a tragedy. What was the key to making your attacks on Seattle, if they were come across, not come across as being malicious in the end?
Well, I knew that she needed to start out in a malicious place, and I certainly had malicious thoughts, right? And I knew that she needed to start there, but also you needed to be a character arc. And I knew at the end she would like Seattle, she would love Seattle, and that it basically was her not taking responsibility for her personal problems to her taking responsibility for her personal problems, and that is all kind of through the prism of Seattle. And by the end, she does say, "I love Seattle." You know, in fact, I'm going to read this because this last thing, and this really was the whole point of the book, and I almost had this written from the beginning, is the final letter to B, where she says, I blame myself. None of what's become of me was Seattle's fault, right? I knew that would be where I was headed. So I knew I was headed to a place that was loving Seattle. But then here's what's funny about that. So I was actually we were at dinner with people who lived in Seattle their whole lives, many generations. So I was saying to them, yeah, so I'm just tomorrow going to write the last page of my book, and it's where the woman who doesn't like Seattle, now she likes Seattle, and it's really pro-Seattle by the end. And then these people who live says, really? Because Seattle's like, it really is so boring. Well, how could she really like Seattle? So, and so because of that, this is the rest of the paragraph. I blame myself. None of what's become of me was Seattle's fault. Well, it might be Seattle's fault. The people are pretty boring. So I just, which I think is like, my God, I can't even not undercut these nice people from Seattle. I can't, but I just have a compulsion. But I'll tell you is that I think that, see, I love all my characters, and I think that this is something that a lot of, I went to go see George Saunders speak last week at Town Hall, and you know, a lot of people accuse him of hating his characters, or being really down on his characters, or just writing people just to mock and humiliate. And he had the same answer which I do, which is that he loves his characters, and I love my characters, and all the characters, I find great humanity in them. So I don't think that I'm being that mocking, like Audrey, for instance, you know, who's like almost kind of the typical horrible Seattle character, you know, as I put her in the book. She's a really big part of me, and I feel like I have that streak in me that judges other mothers at school, and is kind of gets into a panic if things don't look good from the outside. So I was really trying to connect to all these characters in a very personal way. So I think you can make fun of them, but also there has to be humanity. You can't just hate them and mock them. Then the reader knows that. I think there has to be generosity and love always.
And that's what the next observation I had about the book was that the same goes for the school-parent relationship in the book. It starts out nice and funny, and then it turns nasty.
Right.
Being mean as a writer, I found, is essentially a default setting, and it's the low-hanging fruit of satire writing.
Totally. Yes.
And how did you rectify that element in the book and make that likable with the parent relationship?
You mean just like the school stuff, the mothers and everything?
Stuff, yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I never, you know, the first thing I should say is I never try to make my characters likable. I think that then you're in a very bad creative place if you're trying to get people to like your characters. I think I always, the questions I ask myself are, is it true, and is it entertaining? You know, I try to make it real. I try to really make these characters make sense and have, you know, work as whole people in my mind, and I really try to get all that working. And then I like to have them take a lot of action, you know, because that's why the book is so filled with plot, is because people are doing kind of crazy things, you know, and causing crazy situations. And so I just try to say, are they real, and are they entertaining? And I don't try to, likability is never something I think about. You know, I think I would like to think that good writers don't. You know, I think you're in a lot of trouble if you're trying to give them like good characteristics.
Okay. I think being a writer is kind of a drag, personally. It's like having a wart sometimes you can't get rid of because you're always looking and thinking of ideas and listening to conversations, and it's hard to escape from. Do you like being a writer?
I love being a writer. I love it. It's the best thing of my life, and I'm so proud to be a writer. I feel I'm very proud to have been a screenwriter, and I'm really proud to be a novelist, and I'm so proud that those are my people, writers. You know, I think that I think that there's something about novelists in particular, I think, are a very strange breed of people because it takes a really, really long time to write a novel. So you have to want to be alone for years and years at a time, not knowing if anything's going to come of it. I mean, I really admire anyone who's just finished a novel, written any novel, because it's such a scary act of faith, and there's such an emotional risk in sitting there alone, not knowing if anything is going to come of it. You know, and I loved this book as I was writing it. I loved my first book as I was writing it, and I would never, anytime I was not having fun, I would just get up and walk away from the computer because I love writing. I love thinking about what I'm writing. I love just fiendishly going, oh my God, what if this happens, and what if they do this next? And that just makes me almost happier than anything in the world. But at the same time, almost, you know, parallel to that, or just kind of toggling with that, is I love this, and why would anyone care about this? Like, oh my God, I've gone crazy. What am I doing sitting here thinking anyone would care? And those are the two things, almost just like I say in a binary way, that I'm thinking when I'm writing. And so I do love being a writer, and I love that risk. I love the fear of it, you know, of not knowing if it's going to work out, and just kind of pushing yourself into a corner and believing in something that no one else believes in. I mean, that's the other really cool thing about being a novelist, or, I mean, it's a very pure form of art in that nobody really wants you to be doing it. No one's, I mean, I'll have a deal for my next book now that this book's successful. There's going to be a certain amount of interest in my next book, but the world really doesn't need it, you know? So it's such an act of self-will. It's so insane when you think about it. I mean, when I look at this book, I think, how mad did I have to be? Like, how crazy, how much did I want this, man, to work it out and put it on the page? You know, how many years did I spend on this? It really is an act of madness, I think.
That was a good answer.
Okay.
There's a significant component of this book having to do with architecture.
Yes.
If you were to come to Aspen and start making fun of Victorian houses, Bill Sterling would have your head on a stake. I like the line that the houses are poorly situated on the lot. That is, to me, the best part of that, the trance.
See, I love that line too. Well, that's another thing where that actually shouldn't be funny, because I don't even understand what's funny about it. I just wrote it, but that just ends up getting the hugest laugh of any, and I'm like,
it didn't get that big a laugh, but
it actually did. Let's roll the tape. It did. Okay. Maybe it's just because I said thank you. They were
Bernadette.
Being nice. Okay.
Bernadette kind of reminds me of a psychotic female version of Harry Teague. I like Harry.
Harry here? Is he here?
He's a dear friend of our family's.
No, I guess he's not here. Yeah, we love Harry.
And he's not here. Phew.
Yes.
What are your experiences with architecture that made it such a big part of the book?
Well, so as I explained, I wanted it to be about an artist who had a huge, I wanted to write about me, and I didn't want to write about a woman who was a novelist whose novel has failed, because that would have, even I knew that there was no entertainment value in that, as obsessed as I was with it. So then I thought, okay, I have to make her an artist, but have another kind of failure in her past. And I love architecture, and I love houses, and I felt like, and I'm snobby about houses, but can be enthusiastic about houses. So I felt like that was an interesting area. It had some energy for me. And then, in fact, I don't know if you remember this, but that one day when I was here, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we were walking down the mall in Aspen, and there was this guy who was walking down the mall who really looked like a ghost, and coming towards us. And you said, check that guy out. And I looked at him, and I was like, whoa. And you said, let me tell you a funny story about this guy. And you said there was a house that he was. Do you remember who was the developer?
There was a
Okay,
row.
so tell me, because this is what the whole house was based on, was this story.
We were walking down the street in downtown, and I pointed out a guy to you who was a developer.
Right.
And there was a row of houses, luxury townhomes, that had just been built over at the end of the Meadows Road, across from the parking lot.
Okay.
The guy down in the valley at the end of Sneaky Lane, who lives down there, was extremely unhappy with the houses being built there above his view. And upon the day of completion, he bought all 4 townhomes and had a tractor come and tear them all down.
Yeah.
And right now, there is currently an open space field there.
Yeah.
And to me, as sad as that was, it was almost a victory in some twisted way, but it was really, there's just a lot of different ways to look at that. You know, some people said it was wasteful. You know, the guy, for him, I don't necessarily think he ran away from his family and moved to Antarctica over it.
Okay, yeah.
But I did think that was a profound turning point or event in his life.
Of this guy. Well, so that's why, you know, I was looking for something, because the whole book really, I was making a case that something was so horrible. Like for me, my book failed and I felt sorry for myself for a few months. You know, what I was doing was this would have to be something that for 15 years someone wasn't able to get over. And it was very hard to you know, it had to be big, you know, and it had to be, when you got to that point in the book, you had to go, aha, I get it, it makes sense. Not, oh, quit your whining, you know? Mm-hmm. And this seemed big enough. And so I just had it buried in the back of my head and thought this would be a good story.
There's a part in the book where the Bee, I think, she says she sees her father in some awkward way, and is unable to rid herself of that.
Yes.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, this was, oh yeah, I'm glad you like that. It was that the father has a lot of, it's like he wears like breathe right strips, and he's always putting in eye drops, and he's always like wearing croquis around his glasses. I don't know, he has all these accessories, and that she at one point looks over at all of his weird little accessories, and she thinks that it reminds her of like a giant 14-year-old girl. And then she says, once you think of your dad as a giant 14-year-old girl, you just can't go back. And it's just sad that she's just kind of carrying around with her. Yeah.
There's another part in the book where the family is driving. I don't think LG is in the car. I think it's just Bernadette and Bee, and they have a friend with Bee, or they're about to do a sleepover. And the kids are. This is a pretty common thing. The kids are sitting in the back of the car, and the friend of the daughter says, "I'm bored," and then Bee says, "Yeah, I'm bored." And then what does Bernadette do?
Well, she pulls the car over, and she pulls the car over and turns around and says, "You're bored now? Let me give you a secret about life. It only gets more boring." and so you better learn that it's on you to make life interesting, and learn it now. And then I write that the 2 girls burst into tears, and the girl never gets a play date again with Bee. But that's true. My daughter's here. Poppy, you and Callie. You don't remember that, but I said that to you in the car. And Callie. Is that we were in the car, I was in Seattle driving up, and there was nothing to look at out the window, they said. They were, and I did not sit well with me. I just let you have it. Yeah, that there was nothing good to look at out the window. Yeah.
Okay, before this interview gets out of control, and you ramble on anymore, I'd like to try to reestablish credibility here with a two-part yes or no question.
Okay. Okay.
This is two-part yes or no.
Okay.
Adhere to the guidelines. Number one, did you think it was okay to use the part about my pet rabbit Sailor in your book? And number two, are you emotionally prepared to make financial amends for that overstepping of my fragile childhood boundaries?
That's right. That's right. I forgot that was you,
yes
the Sailor
or no?
the rabbit. Okay.
Do you need me to reread the question?
No, I don't feel bad about it. And no, I am not going to make you any financial amends.
Okay, good.
No to
good.
both. How about
Fair
that?
enough.
Okay, stand up for myself. I can do it. I'm an artist. My life is my canvas.
You wrote a...
And your life too.
Good. Well, I can be an eraser as well, so don't forget it. You wrote a piece for the New Yorker magazine called The Rainbow Room.
Oh, yes.
And it was a huge hit.
Dear Mountain Room parents, actually, if we're keeping track of what it's really called.
Dear Mountain Room parents.
Yeah, okay.
It was a huge hit, and it got you in a little bit of hot water. Where did that fit in the timeline of you writing Where'd You Go, Bernadette?
That was, you know, I wrote that after, when the book was going through copy editing and everything. It just occurred to me. And it was so weird. I never even made the connection with that piece and my book with emails, because I really do write in other ways. But that was just something from our preschool, our real preschool, which was that it was Day of the Dead, and that there was a Day of the Dead celebration. There were just these increasingly elaborate emails that were, they sent one email the teachers did of, hey, we're doing Day of the Dead at our school, everyone join in.
And I've been lobbying with Colorado state legislators to make the reply all feature in email illegal in Colorado.
Exactly. So the reply, so what happened is that then they kept getting these elaborate, you know, just to clarify, another one, you know, it's not a religious holiday, just to clarify, just to clarify. And I just thought it was really funny just reading this one-sided part of the correspondence, just knowing what kind of fire hose of like hurt feelings and outrage and indignation was happening between the emails. So that's kind of what I did. And then there was something about it that they kept talking about, that they were referring to the altar. Will you come for pictures for our altar? Will you do this for the altar? And then by the end, when the woman who's the teacher writing all of these emails, she said, to clarify, it's not, let's just stop using the word altar and call it what it really is, cinder blocks covered with a Seahawks blanket. And that's what got me into trouble with our old preschool when there was a mountain room, because they were very upset that everyone was really pegging it on them, because it placed the school in Seattle.
And then didn't you really flip the table on that, getting in trouble?
I guess I didn't know that I told you this. Yes, so at first they were really upset about it, that they thought that I was making fun of their school, and had even like an outside crisis manager or something. I mean, like really, like they thought it was just going to be this awful thing. And I was so freaked out, because I really didn't want to upset them. I loved the school, and I thought it was funny. And
didn't you call the New Yorker and tell them at one point to try to not publish?
I wanted to take out the Seattle reference, you know, because then I thought maybe they would not, you know, because I really didn't want people to be upset by it. And so then they asked if I would come to a parent forum and basically defend myself in front of all the irate parents. And I said, yes, I'll do anything, I'll do anything. And then I think my boyfriend George was just like, don't do that, you know, that's ridiculous, don't go crazy, you know. But I said, I'll do it. And so then then this thing that was going to be me basically standing there being stoned by these outraged parents turned into, the piece got so beloved that they turned it into a fundraiser to meet me. Yeah, so it was just funny how then everybody loved it. It's like one of the most emailed pieces, you know, everybody loves it. And so then they were like, the school that's where Maria Semple's kid goes. So that was kind of funny. Hey, Hoggy, I think it's time to turn it over.
Okay, I want to ask you one more question. Who was your astronaut instructor?
Oh, Frog.
Frog, okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, Frog. Yeah. Did we have him? Yeah, we know Frog, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, do we have questions from the audience? How do we do this? Just call on the audience. Okay, okay, Jerry Koretsky. Hi. Hi.
You said that letter was the culminating force in the book and explains everything.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about your process of writing that letter? It has so many fabulous, funny things in it. How long did it take you to get that whole list?
It didn't take me very long. I mean, I do a lot of drafts, and so I probably sat down and in one day or maybe, I might have given myself, maybe I gave myself a week for that. There were a few things that I thought would be hard, and I gave myself a week, just sat down on Monday and thought I'm just going to kind of hammer through this. And I just kind of went from joke to joke in this one. I edited it out, but there's a lot of kind of emotional ups and downs, and it really veers emotionally, which is what I was most interested in. Right when it seems to be funny, she just kind of chops it off and changes the subject, and that was kind of the hardest thing to craft. But of all this stuff, I don't know, it just came pretty easily to me, because I was, when I first moved to Seattle, and I feel like there's a slight misperception about me in Seattle, because now people want to interview me about, oh, what do you think of Seattle, and you're an expert on Seattle, and I think all I was a lady who moved there who didn't know how to get around, and that's really all the book is. It's talking about the intersections and the one-way streets, and so it was very much just, and the Idaho cars in front of me, it was really just my daily life of moving to a new city. And I guess Boston's a very hard city to get around, and a lot of people have emailed me about Boston saying this is exactly what it was like when I moved to Boston. And it was really just the street grid that was really the source of all of my frustration. and it was about drivers. I mean, it really was just my daily life. And so those were percolating in me. I'd sit there and just kind of hone them in my head in my bitter rage at nothing. And so I would just kind of work on them in my head. So maybe it took me a week, and then I would rewrite it, and it was fun. I mean, I really like that section now. I think it's funny, and it's pretty cool. It works. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Bill Sterling, defending himself. He is a Victorian. Yes, to sell.
Maria, it's the funniest book I've ever read in my life.
Oh, thank you.
And I knew your father before I knew Lowe III and you, and he was the funniest person I think I've ever met in my life as well, too.
Move over.
And, you're really moving ahead. One of the very interesting things about the Winter Words is it started with Jim Salter.
Yes.
And the other bookend is you, Maria. And those are two of Aspen's first writing families. And it's so great that it started with it this winter. It was just brilliant of the Writers Foundation to do it this way and to end with you. Now this book is so funny. Your other book also was funny. It had some really terrific parts in it.
Thank you.
And some authors then get into a mode of just being humorists, like Nora Ephron or someone like that. It just doesn't stop, Maria, through the whole book. Is that going to be the theme for you in future books?
Well, and this is very hard to talk about because it seems very disingenuous, but I actually didn't try to make the book that funny, or the first book that funny. I mean, I was really just trying to make it true and try to kind of make it full of energy and make it, make the rhythms of it good. You kind of read it out loud and you get the rhythms, and I think that was a lot of my comedy writing background. But, when I was reading it, I was saying, oh, I think that's funny and that's not funny. I was certainly aware of it, but that's not really what I was going for. I'd say if there was a list of priorities, that would be maybe 20 on my list. That was really very low on my list. But I think you have you're born with a comic sensibility. Obviously, Lowe has it. I have it. George has it. My boyfriend does. In that you see something and you think it's funny, you know, like the house being torn down. Lo was just like, this is a hilarious story, you know, where a lot of people would say, oh, you want to hear a sad story? He's like, I've got the funniest story to tell you, you know, and that's how I am too, you know. We just, no matter what it is, we're seeing the humor in it, and I think that's just nature, and so therefore when I write, it's just going to come out that way. But I love that it's funny, and you know, I'm now almost embracing it. At first, I feel like there's so many really funny writers out there, and I don't think I'm that funny, that I feel like, oh, don't call me funny, because there's other people much funnier. Like, I really, really respect some really brilliant, funny writers, and I don't feel even comfortable being talked about in the same sentence as them. So, well, thank you. I mean, that's very nice to think of, but, because I love that, and that, you know, when people say, I read your book over like 3 nights in a row, and I was laughing all the way through, I thought, like, wow, good for me, man. That is hard to do. You know, like, I did something amazing. If that, no one's ever done that for me. Let me just put it to you that way. And I wish someone would, because it must be nice. Yeah. Because I would love to laugh for 3 straight days. Yeah. Anybody else? Was that a nasty answer? Okay. Yes. No. Okay.
Maria, I'd like to hear a little bit more about growing up with Dad. And you're a writing family, and when I hear you and Lo speak, I hear your father speaking.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering how that shaped what you're doing now, especially moving from screenwriting to being a novelist.
Well, I think just in a really basic way, and this is where Jim Salter, to Bill's question, really factors in. I think growing up in a house where someone is making a living writing it's so unusual that I take it for granted. You think, okay, I can make a living as a writer, that people do that, and a lot of people don't. It would never occur to them. You know, I referred to my boyfriend George Myers here. He's a TV writer, wrote for The Simpsons forever. And he really had nobody in his life he didn't know anyone who was a writer, didn't know anyone, God forbid, who had a career writing, and so he was just like kind of creating as he went along. And I think that with my father, just to have the path laid out for us, that's a huge advantage. That it didn't seem like something impossible that I had to create for myself. It felt very natural. And he was always reading. I mean, I think more than anything, any kind of writers, you have to be reading, you know. And so we had such a house filled with books, and he was always reading, and so that I think has a lot to do with it. He was very social, and he got us there were always people. I mean, I think half the people here have been at our house for dinner, you know, in one of our fabulous dinner parties. And I think that you have to love people and be fundamentally interested in people and be really just curious and want to know them and want to know more about everyone you come across. I think that has to be an instinct in a novelist, and I think if you don't have it, you're not going to write a good novel. And so just growing up in a very social way with very interesting people around, and my father and my mother both really valued interesting people, and that was part of our growing up. And I don't think a lot of people necessarily can say that about their upbringing. Lo, what do you think about that?
I remember reading screenplays as a kid and absorbing that format as a normal thing, which is a screenplay is a difficult thing to read because it takes active participation from
that's right. You have to fill it in
from the reader. It takes and then the other thing I remember is yes, a lot of creative people around, and the social gatherings at the house, which seem to be these days is fewer and farther in between.
That's right. It just doesn't seem to happen with our generation as much. I mean, we would have people over 4 nights out of 7.
And the other thing that it was interesting about that also with our father was being able to be on the set of movies.
Yeah.
Like I have vivid memories of being on the sets of movies before they were out and then seeing them later. Like I remember being on the set of Logan's Run when we were watching King Kong being filmed.
Oh, that's right. It was
Remember
filming on the lot. Yeah.
And those experiences and meeting actors.
Yeah.
And having those, but taking it for granted and not realizing the significance of it until a later
Until
date.
afterwards. Yeah, it was cool. Yeah, it was good. One more question? Come on. I promise you. Okay. It will be a really good answer. Hi.
Hi. So a friend of mine, Jeff Weingrad, wrote a book about Saturday Night Live.
Oh.
And when I read it, I just see it as facts. And then I read Lowe's articles in the paper because as I know him, I could hear him telling me these things, and I'm laughing my head off because I know Lowe and it's coming from him. When you guys read each other's work, do you read them as columns and books, or something that your sibling is saying to you, and how are you interpreting what you read that each other wrote?
When I read Lowe's stuff, I mean, I've got to say the main feeling is pride, I think, above all, more than, I'm just so proud of him that he did it, and I'm so, it's hard to write, you know. I think Lowe sat down and wrote this. Like, he has other stuff to do. He'd rather be hiking on Highlands Bowl, right? Or, yeah, I mean, he has, you know, so I really admire the work and the craft. And so I think that's the main thing, and I of course hear his voice, but I also, you know, talking a little bit about emotional risk, you kind of went dark with this last column, babe, you know that, right? Yeah. Okay, I don't know if anyone knows his last column, but it was like a little dark about Aspen and this season and what Aspen's turning it into, and I was mainly, you know, you're interested because you get to see a side of someone you love that you don't know necessarily, and then I'm proud that he crafted it and put it down, and it's just kind of a reminder of how deep people run, you know, that we goof around and stuff, Lowe and I do, but then when I read his columns, I just see there's so much more going on, and that he's worked hard and crafted it. So that's what I see.
And my experience with that, Darren, is when you read something that someone in your family has written, it's challenging to read it objectively because there are so many attached emotions and backstories, and there's the whole soup of emotions attached to it. So it is hard to decipher. With Maria's book, I read it before it was published, and so I liked it, but I wasn't sure how to react to it without seeing how other people reacted to it. It sounds shallow, but truly, you're really not sure how to have your own feeling about it because you have so many other feelings towards it. Yeah, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's right. We needed to end on a laugh. What was this about? Oh, we got one. Okay. Good night. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.